I've been waiting for you.
So if you guys don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh was originally going to be a battle manga. Yes, Takahashi, the original creator, wanted to do something different from a lot of the shonens that were happening during that time around 1996 to 1997. But with the popularity of one chapter in the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, during volume 2, Fang Cards Part 1 and Part 2, we get the introduction of Seto Kaiba, who was just going to be a one-shot, or for this instance a two-shot, if that is the right terminology, but he was going to be a two-shot villain. But as time progressed on and children were actually reading the manga, they kept on messaging Shonen Jump and they're like, oh, please tell us more about this game, Takahashi. We want to see more. How do we play it? Where can we buy it? So Takahashi saw this as a plan of some sort that he could capitalize on and switch the plot for the Yu-Gi-Oh manga. Also, he talks about a decade later, this information came from Times magazine in around 2004, if I'm correct, or 2001, somewhere around there. But 10 years later, or 9 rather, during 2011, 2012, he comes out with this book called Dual Art, which basically has concept ideas that he did years ago along with artwork that he just worked on. And he states in one of the interviews, because it comes with a lot of interviews and you get a lot of information about it, so I'd highly recommend for you guys to buy the Dual Art. But Takahashi states that he also couldn't think of ideas on a weekly basis, and to be honest, that's a very fair and valid reason to switch the plot, because coming up with random games that are interesting is very hard. If you guys have read the original manga, you can see that some of the random games are somewhat boring and a lot of them are prolonged, and of course that has to do with distributing the manga on a weekly basis and just sort of fillering until you can think of another idea. And that's my main gripe I have with Monster World. I think that's possibly the weakest arc out of the arcs that I read for the Yu-Gi-Oh manga. I guarantee you the things that I have coming up, which is Battle City and then Memory World, completely shit on Monster World simply because they're much grander, and then we really get to see the true story of the Pharaoh. Though if you guys read Monster World, it's prolonged for such a long time, and of course you can tell that he was most likely thinking of the idea for Duelist Kingdom, because right after that we get the introduction of what we're known to, which is card games, and that is where the whole plot change happens. But we're going to be talking about what happens with the first 7 Yu-Gi-Oh volumes of the manga, and we're going to be talking about the original Atem. So if you guys don't know, we get this huge introduction of the Pharaoh in volume 1, chapter 1, titled The God Puzzle. You guys can check it out, I'll link it down in the description below. Of course you're gonna have to buy it though. But we get to see Atem, and there's this just huge somewhat backstory on him, and Grandpa Moto talks about his go, and also I'll pop up the screenshots of the translations right now so you guys can get more information about it. And the thing with that is that when we see Atem come out, first of all, his design is very different, and everyone's design is different except for Yugi's. It's somewhat similar, and Anzu's is somewhat similar, but the thing with Yugi is his hair sort of straightens out a little bit more. Though what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these original character designs, of course, are going to change over time. It just makes sense. But you see that these concept and ideas for these characters before the plot change happened really sort of dictates what was going to happen for their character. So we see Atem come out. Of course, he's been encapsulated in the puzzle for 3,000 years. His mind has been just completely rather mind crushed. Of course, he didn't get the mind crushed, but just his mind's been completely crushed. We can tell just because of how he acts into the real world. I mean, I would imagine he has no sense of what's going on. Of course, he gets all his information from the host of his body, Yugi. I mean, it just makes sense, and that's why he's such a prodigy at dueling. But of course, Yugi has the upper hand, and that's very evident in the final duel. Though we see Atem and his mind's just completely boggled. He doesn't have senses on how people are supposed to act in the modern world, because if you sort of fit into how people acted 3,000 years ago and they just acted differently. Now, I'm not trying to say Atem had his memories from the past, but we can sort of argue, I would say, that he of course still has his tendencies, that how he acted 3,000 years ago when he was the Pharaoh Atem and not the nameless Pharaoh. So of course he comes back into the real world and he doesn't know how to act. He comes off as this person that's very fierce and of course has a morality, but it's just an antiquated morality, if you guys know what I mean, because we see Yugi, Junoichi, Honda, and Anzu in that chapter along with the other chapters, and they're not as fearful as Atem is. They're not as engaging as he would be. He's very just, I'm gonna prove my point and we're gonna have a random game and the loser has to put something on the line, which I think is a cool concept. but I think the best thing about that is that it shows Atem's personality. He's doing things for the better good of the world, of course, just helping out Yugi and Co and his friends, but the way he does it doesn't come off as someone that would do it in the modern world, and you see that through, I mean, all the random games. And one other thing I'm going to sidetrack to is the random games. If you guys don't know, the random games, it's a cool concept, of course, but at the same time, it gets kind of boring after a while because some random games are just like boring in comparison to the cool random games. The thing with the random games is that Atem never loses, and the reason why is because he's somewhat pure-hearted, because the thing with the random games are the loser lose because of their arrogance, and that's evident for Yugioh because of his greed for money. The thing with Prisoner 777 is that he of course dies, but that was through his own arrogance and just his whole fit that he had about, man, I want to drink, I'm gonna kidnap Anzu, this, that. And Atem's doing these stuff for his friends, along with, of course, helping out people and helping out the world. Though I wonder if Takahashi never switched the plot. Most likely the Yu-Gi-Oh manga would have just crashed down into sales and such, and it probably would have gotten canceled. Let's be completely honest, right? I think the reason why he switched the plot, of course, he liked the whole concept of card games and it was much easier, but I guarantee you the ratings were falling. Now, I don't have a source for this, but from what I know and from what I've heard is that around the 7th volume, around the 6th to 7th volume, the sales were going down for the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, hence why he changed the plot. And the thing is, you can somewhat notice it, though that's a video for another day. But I wonder if, let's say, the Yu-Gi-Oh manga just kept on going on for whatever, 12, 14, 16 volumes, however long it might be, would his character change? And we see the original Atem. We see that, of course, he comes back from the puzzle and he actually has a physical body. Well, he has a host named Yugimoto, and Yugi sort of rubs off on him. He gets accustomed to how people act in the modern world in comparison to how they acted 3,000 years ago, and of course he's still doing stuff in a way that I would say no other Yu-Gi-Oh character would have done it, but still, I wonder, like, how would his character change? Because the original Atem is a character that is somewhat dark. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh is it's not that dark when comparing it to other animes, of course, but for Yu-Gi-Oh standards, the first 7 volumes are pretty damn dark. Still, would his character change? As I've said before, he comes off as a very dark person that executes stuff and means that not the average human being along with the sadistic human being in the modern time would do. So let's just say that he did change. Would he have been the Atem that we saw later on throughout the series? Of course, that whole iconic duel that happened in Duelist Kingdom with Pegasus, and he learns that lesson. And one personality flaw that I still believe he would have probably kept is his arrogance. Atem has arrogance to the max. I mean, he's a very arrogant person. If you really analyze the Pegasus duel, right? Volume 8 of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, it's literally in the 2nd to 3rd chapter. I don't think the duel wraps up until chapter 5 of volume 8, but we see that if he had just waited for the timer, he would have won that duel. But no, he thought that was a coward's way of dueling. So let's assume the random games are still going on, and he was put in a scenario like that. Of course, we don't know what the random game was going to be because it would be random, but let's just say, would he have waited? Would he have done it in a way where it proves that he's a badass and he does it in power? Because the way Atem duels is just brute strength. Would he have done that? And if so, would that be the lesson that he's trying to learn for the following arc after Monster World? Now, of course, it's Duelist Kingdom, but since the card game thing is not going to happen, then most likely Duelist Kingdom wouldn't occur, or well, at least the way it's executed. Maybe, let's say, Pegasus is still the main villain, but this time it would just be random games instead of a dueling tournament. Now, because if you look at Duelist Kingdom itself, it literally, if you guys don't know this, I'm getting off track, but I just gotta make this point. I've watched Duelist Kingdom probably 4 times. I kid you not, 4 times. And I watched it, probably, 1 sub, probably 3 times dub, somewhere around there. And it wasn't until I read the manga that I figured out that it's literally a RPG game. I kid you not, like, I remember just sort of thinking when I was reading the manga, and I just started laughing because I can't believe I completely missed it. And I'm not going to tell you guys why, because I want you guys to have the same feeling that I had, because it's so funny. Like, it's just completely funny. Now, I'd highly recommend for you guys to check out the manga or rewatch Duelist Kingdom and sort of just analyze it. Just think it through, alright? And you'll realize that it's an RPG game. I figured out that it was an RPG game, or well, at least had the model of an RPG game around the Mako Tsunami duel when Junichi defeats Mai through that weird way. Of course, Atem just aided him, which I was going to do a whole separate video on, but it's kind of hard to explain and sort of make a video on. And Junichi is able to smell the fish, and then we get Atem versus Mako Tsunami. Now, I don't know his Japanese name off the top of my head. It's probably the most confusing Yu-Gi-Oh character name in the manga so far, except for those like random one-shots, so I do apologize. But getting back on topic, would that still be his lesson that he had to learn? And also, how far would they go into the Egyptian route for Atem, the original Atem? Let's say he does calm down, alright? How would they, well, he's KT and his editors and such, how would they sort of play out the whole thing about his Egyptian past and such? And really, I wonder, how far would they go into the Egyptian past? In addition to that, what about the characters such as Otogi, such as Merrick, Rashid, Ashizu, etc.? Now, when you look at it, the three main people of Yu-Gi-Oh, I would argue, excluding Yugi, when it comes down to Atem's past and his, of course, backstory. And of course, Merrick plays a huge factor into that because of his back, and he has some sort of information about the Pharaoh because that was what his family was basically meant for. They were waiting until the Pharaoh returns, and they have information that they pass down to the son of each generation. But the main people, Shadi, the person that is really ambiguous as heck. I mean, no, Shadi, we have some sort of explanation on him. I was about to say that he's more ambiguous than Yugi from GX, but nah, no one comes close to that. Though we have Shadi, and then we have Dark Bakura. Dark Bakura is literally shown in Monster World before the whole plot change occurs. So I think that they would still, or well, Takahashi and his editors will still go down in the route of that whole Egyptian past. Maybe we won't get an arc like Memory World, but there will be something along the lines with them. And the funny thing is, Zork is also introduced, and Zork is literally the main villain of Memory World, and that's where the whole concept of Zork actually comes from. He's in Monster World. I actually thought that was really neat and cool how he's in the Capsule Monsters chess match, and then later on he appears in Monster World. Really cool idea, and just really cool writing as well. However though, guys, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. What are your guys' thoughts on the original Atem? Now, regarding the original Atem, his personality somewhat changes from the first 7 to 8 to 38, I think, somewhere around there. And I would argue that if there was no plot change from random games to card games, then his personality would be somewhat different and it would go into a different route. However, guys, I want to hear you guys' thoughts down below on this. And really, if you guys did enjoy this series, please do suggest a character that was featured in the early chapters of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and I probably will do a video on them and how they probably would have played out if the plot change never happened. I think, one character comes to mind, and that is, if you guys know, it's Hakuna-san. And if you guys didn't know him, he's very similar to Yugi. But that's a video for another day. Please do leave a like. Check out the Facebook and Twitter fan page regarding Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. We got a lot of Vrains fans in there. We got a lot of Duel Monsters fans, 5Ds, GX, Zexal, Arc 5 fans, but we need some fans of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, right? We need some fans of that, and especially we got a lot of fans of Dark Side Dimensions, but we need some fans of the OG manga, and if you guys are fans of the OG manga, join that Facebook fan page and start discussing, and let's really get the manga out there. Let's make people really see what the original story was about, and how the characters were truly meant to play out. That's the video for today. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Have a great day, and see you guys later.